Hey, I'm Eddie, and if you think the Bible has not a lot to say about health and wellness, I think you'd be wrong. I think there's a lot we can learn from studying the Bible, understanding the tenets of Christianity. We can learn a lot about how the human body works, how eating works, what it means to relate to one another as it comes to food. And so I just want to put together a short list for you to really kind of get the basic framework for what it means to eat a Christian diet. So here is principle number one. First thing you want to do is eat food as close to the way God made it as possible. Let me explain that. You see, in the beginning, God created the world. Everything was made good. He made man and woman very good, and they lived in perfect communion. Well, as you may know, sin enters the world and destroys the framework in which man and women lived in. And so that, as a result, what happens is mankind flutters, the evil comes into the world, thorns and thistles are produced by the ground. But that also means that human beings started to distort God's creation. And one of the ways we do that is through our food supply. Now, you may think there's nothing wrong, or no difference rather, between this fruit and that fruit, or this piece of meat and that piece of meat. Well, you'd be wrong. We've actually kind of ruined our food supply with things like GMOs, as I like to say, God move over. That's one way we like to talk about GMOs. We've changed the nature of certain foods we eat, including fruits and vegetables. We spray them down with different chemicals like glyphosate, which is in Roundup, which now we know is one of the leading causes of some cancers that we're discovering. And we've been using that for years. We also know that industrial meat industries are crippling not just us, not just human beings and the animals, but also the environment. They're terrible. And what we're doing is when those animals eat bad food, we're ingesting those animals and we're eating what they eat. And so we have to be very careful about the ways we eat. So what's the solution? Eat food as close to the way God made it. And the way we do this is we eat organic foods, foods that were grown the naturally way they were meant to be grown, like fruits and vegetables. We eat fish that's wild caught and not farmed and fed corn and grain like modern farmed fish is fed. We also want to eat grass-fed meat as best we can. So that way we're avoiding some of the industrialized meats that some of these cows eat city garbage and different corn and grain, and you don't want to ingest those foods as best you can. So the best thing we can do as people who love Jesus, people who are committed to him, one framework we can do, and obviously this principle applies for everyone, is to eat food as close to the way God made it as possible. Second thing, drink water. So think back to the Bible times, if you can, if you know anything about the Bible times, and what were they drinking back then? Were they drinking orange juice or Coca-Cola? Probably not. You mostly read about them drinking water, maybe sometimes some tea. You might think about tea or coffee in modern day Israel. That's primarily what they drink. But they certainly weren't drinking Coca-Cola back then. They certainly weren't drinking orange juice because there was no method for them to squeeze 75 oranges and then add sugar to it and create a drink for us to just drink along our journey. As they walked, because they didn't have cars, around the region, they would often stop in at wells and drink water. That's what they did. And that principle is actually healthy for us. Again, human beings have created things that have been good in moderation, but oftentimes we just over and abuse. And things like orange juice, apple juice, cranberry juice, things like Gatorade, even high in sugar, things like soda. Those things like that are actually harming our bodies. And it's not the way Jesus certainly drank. It's definitely not the way we should drink now. So we've got to be mindful of that. You don't want to drink your calories, and worse, drink your sugar all in one sitting. So be careful in that respect. Third thing we need to know, the third principle, is that if you do eat grains, eat ancient grains and sprouted grains. Now, this is sometimes controversial. Some people are fully gluten-free. I understand that. And I would recommend that before anyone take in any sort of bread or gluten, they should get a food sensitivity test. And the reason being is that all of our bread supply is quite changed. The soil quality is much different. Here in America, we've crossbred grains and changed the nature of grains. And so it's causing a lot of things like gluten sensitivity and some different autoimmune conditions. And so we want to be very careful about ingesting it. But if you can ingest it, and you should, and your body says you can take it after you take your test, I would say get some ancient grains and some sprouted grains. These are the grains closer to the way that Jesus and his disciples ate their bread. Now, you can't just say, oh, Jesus ate bread, I'll eat bread. Well, Jesus didn't eat Wonder Bread. He didn't eat Iron Kids bread. He definitely didn't eat hot dog buns that you get at a baseball game. He ate bread, sourdough bread like that is actually much more healthy, especially for your stomach. So if you're going to eat grains, go for ancient grains or sprouted grains. Principle 4, don't binge eat. Now, I don't think you need a video like this to tell you not to binge eat, but just in case you want a little bit of enforcement, the way they ate in the times of Christ was not through binge eating. There was certainly people that that were gluttonous and that did eat a lot at once, and typically those were rich people, but now everyone has access to be able to do that. And in one sitting, we can eat 2 or 3 or even sometimes 4,000 calories in a meal if we add on a chocolate cake or a cherry pie or ice cream or something like that onto a pizza or tacos or whatever it is. So you have to be very careful about binge eating and consuming tons of food in one sitting. Now, today you can go to Costco and you can grab a big tub of like almonds or cashews or something like that, or even think about like dehydrated fruit. You can get a big tub of that, and then you could just get a handful of it and just put it in your mouth. Well, back 2,000 years ago, you couldn't just grab a handful of cashews. You actually had to go climb a tree, get a nut, crack it open, and eat the almond. Or eat the cashew. You had to do that back then, or go to a market where you could barely afford it and grab a couple of them, but you still had to crack those open. So be very careful about binge eating in quantities that our human body was probably never meant to ever consume all at one time. Principle 5, don't eat alone. Yeah, modern US people like us, we have a way of getting our takeout food, sitting in front of the TV and watching a modern TV show, and we're watching a football game and just eating and vegging out. That's not the way we ate in the past as human beings. In fact, meals were celebratory. In all of Scripture, we celebrate different big key moments around meals in the Bible. The wedding supper of the Lamb, Passover meal. These are meals that we celebrate with. And so if you're gonna eat and you're gonna cook, invite some friends over, invite your family over, make a ritual out of it. Be in the moment and engage your neighbors. And if you're gonna drink together. If you're gonna eat a dessert, eat it together. Be together in those moments, because those are the ways we connect with people. We always connect over meals. And so I want to encourage you, use your dinner table as a means of making connection with others. Let me give you a bonus tip real quick. And here's the bonus principle. Eat, stop, eat. You see, this method of eat, stop, eat is actually the way people ate back then. You see, food wasn't widely available all over the place. You had to go into certain areas, into towns to get meals, and you would have those meals, and then they would travel by foot for long times without having snacks. Today, we graze all day, eating nuts and berries and chips and whatever we have, just trying to make it to the next meal. Back then, they would eat large meals in the evenings, and then they would go all day until they got their next meal. And they sometimes didn't know when their next meal was coming. So that's another thing to be mindful of. And another modern way of saying this is something like intermittent fasting. Now, I'm not trying to spiritualize intermittent fasting. There's a very big difference between intermittent fasting and spiritual fasting, and I want to address that here. But I will say, if you want to think about intermittent fasting for something like losing weight, there is an argument that the people back then did eat in that respect. And so consider this method of eating, stopping, and eating, giving yourself 12, 14, 16, or even 18 hours in between your meals. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this video, and if you did like this video, would you just quickly subscribe to this channel so we can get more Christian fitness, wellness, and health principles out there? I appreciate you.